A poor single mom helps a disabled veteran cross the street, not knowing he's the governor, secretly testing his citizens, and when her act of kindness thrusts her into the spotlight, shocking secrets from her past threaten to destroy everything. But will compassion be enough to save her future? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Rain pelted the cracked sidewalk as Clara Thompson hurried along, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles. Her arms ached from carrying 2 heavy grocery bags while trying to hold an umbrella over her 8-year-old daughter Lily. The afternoon sky had turned an angry gray, matching Clara's mounting anxiety about being late for her evening shift at May's Diner. "Mommy, can we have hot chocolate when we get home?" Lily asked, skipping beside her mother despite the gloomy weather. Her bright yellow raincoat stood out like a splash of sunshine against the dreary day. Clara's heart squeezed. "Not today, sweetie. Mommy has to work tonight. Mrs. Martinez will watch you, remember?" Lily's shoulders slumped slightly, but she nodded with the resilience that never failed to amaze Clara. "That's okay. She makes good cookies anyway." A gust of wind whipped Clara's damp hair across her face. She adjusted her grip on the grocery bags, the plastic handles cutting into her palms. Inside were the cheapest items she could find: store-brand pasta, marked-down bread, and the last few vegetables from the discount bin. It would have to last until her next paycheck. As they approached the busy intersection at Main and Oak, Clara noticed an elderly man in a wheelchair struggling at the crosswalk. His weathered face was partially hidden beneath a worn baseball cap with a military veteran's patch, and his thin jacket seemed inadequate against the rain. He was trying to maneuver his wheelchair forward, but one wheel kept catching on the curb's edge. Clara checked her watch. She was already 10 minutes late for her shift. Her boss had warned her about tardiness just last week. Another late arrival could cost her the job she desperately needed. But the man tried again to bump his chair over the curb, his hands trembling with effort. A car horn blared as it sped through a yellow light, sending a spray of water onto the sidewalk. The veteran flinched. "Mommy, that man needs help," Lily said softly, tugging at Clara's sleeve. Clara bit her lip, then set down her grocery bags under the shallow awning of a closed shop. "Hold these, sweetie. Stay right here." She hurried to the veteran's side, her umbrella held high to shield them both. "Sir, may I help you across?" His eyes, bright blue despite his age, met hers with a mix of relief and dignity. "Much obliged, ma'am. This curb's giving me more trouble than it should." Clara positioned herself behind the wheelchair, carefully tilting it back to navigate over the curb. As they entered the crosswalk, a red pickup truck roared through the intersection, ignoring the walk signal. Clara pulled the wheelchair back just in time, her heart pounding. "Some people forget their manners in the rain," the veteran commented calmly, though she noticed his hands gripping the armrests tightly. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, waiting for a clear opening in traffic. "Been through worse, dear. Much worse." His voice carried the weight of memories Clara could only imagine. When the traffic finally stopped, Clara guided the wheelchair forward. Rain drummed against her umbrella and ran down her back, but she kept it tilted to protect the veteran from the worst of the downpour. A car honked impatiently, and Clara felt her cheeks flush with a familiar shame, the kind that came from being judged by strangers who saw only what they wanted to see. "Don't mind them," the veteran said, as if reading her thoughts. "Kindness takes time, and some folks have forgotten that." They reached the other side, where Clara carefully helped the wheelchair over the opposite curb. The veteran turned to face her, and she noticed a barely visible scar along his jawline, partially hidden by silver stubble. "Thank you, young lady. Not many would stop these days." He adjusted his cap, and Clara caught a glimpse of a medal pinned to his jacket's inner lapel. "It's nothing," Clara said, suddenly self-conscious. "Anyone would have—" "No," he interrupted gently. "Not anyone. What's your name?" "Clara. And that's my daughter Lily," she added, gesturing to where Lily stood watching them, carefully guarding the grocery bags. Lily waved shyly, her free hand clutching her bright yellow hood against the wind. "I'm Henry," the veteran said, his weathered face creasing into a warm smile. "You've got a fine mother there, young lady." Lily beamed with pride, and Clara felt a sudden lump in her throat. It had been a long time since anyone had said something nice about her, especially in front of Lily. "We should go," Clara said, glancing at her watch and wincing at the time. "Are you sure you'll be all right, sir?" "Right as rain," Henry replied with a slight twinkle in his eye. "You've done more than enough." Clara hurried back to Lily, gathering up their groceries with trembling hands. The paper bag had gotten wet at the bottom, and she prayed it wouldn't split before they made it home. As they rushed away, Clara heard Henry call out one last, "Thank you," his voice nearly lost in the sound of traffic and rain. She glanced back once to see him watching them go, his expression thoughtful and somehow knowing. But she had no time to wonder about it. Her uniform was damp, her hair was a mess, and she was now 20 minutes late for her shift. The evening ahead loomed long and difficult, but for just a moment, the warm feeling of having helped someone made the rain seem a little less cold and the burden a little less heavy. "You did a good thing, Mommy," Lily said as they hurried along, her small hand finding Clara's free one and squeezing tight. Clara squeezed back, managing a small smile despite her worry. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could light up even the darkest days. She just hoped her boss would understand. Clara burst through the back door of May's Diner, her uniform already damp from the short dash from her car. Water dripped from her ponytail onto the worn linoleum floor as she rushed to clock in, her heart pounding. Lily followed close behind, clutching her backpack and favorite stuffed rabbit. "You're 15 minutes late, Thompson," Mr. Peterson's sharp voice cut through the kitchen clatter. Her boss stood with his arms crossed, his round face flushed with irritation. "That's the third time this month." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Peterson. There was this elderly veteran in a wheelchair at the crosswalk, and he needed—" "Save the excuses," he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "One more late arrival, and we'll need to have a serious discussion about your future here. Got it?" Clara nodded quickly, blinking back tears. "Yes, sir. It won't happen again." She guided Lily to her usual booth in the corner, where the little girl had spent countless evenings doing homework while Clara worked. "Here's your coloring book, sweetie. I'll bring you some milk in a minute." "It's okay, Mommy," Lily whispered, reaching up to squeeze her mother's hand. "You did a good thing helping that nice man." Clara managed a small smile, touching her daughter's cheek before hurrying to the break room. She changed into her dry uniform with trembling fingers, trying to steady her breathing. She couldn't lose this job. The diner's evening shifts, combined with her morning cleaning work, barely covered the rent and groceries as it was. The dinner rush hit hard. Clara darted between tables, forcing cheerfulness as she took orders and delivered plates. A couple at table 7 complained their burgers were overcooked. The businessman at the counter barked at her for being too slow with his coffee refill. At table 3, a teenage girl knocked over her milkshake and blamed Clara for bumping the table. "I'm so sorry," Clara repeated for what felt like the 100th time that evening, mopping up the sticky mess while the girl's friends snickered. She felt invisible, just another faceless server they could treat however they wanted. During a brief lull, Clara leaned against the counter next to Jenny, her favorite coworker. The older waitress had been at May's for 20 years and always had a kind word for everyone. "Rough night, honey?" Jenny asked, sliding a cup of coffee toward Clara. "Thanks." Clara wrapped her cold fingers around the warm mug. "I just can't seem to do anything right today." "Don't let Peterson get to you. He's all bark, no bite." Jenny lowered her voice. "I saw what happened earlier, you know, with that veteran at the crosswalk." Clara shrugged, stirring her coffee. "It wasn't anything special. Anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't have. I watched from the window. All those people just standing there, letting that poor man struggle in the rain. But you jumped right in to help, even though you knew you'd be late." "It was just something small," Clara insisted, uncomfortable with the praise. "He needed help, that's all. I didn't even think about it." Sometimes the small things mean the most. Jenny squeezed her shoulder. "You're a good person, Clara Thompson. Don't let anyone make you forget that." The evening dragged on. Clara's feet ached, and her smile grew more forced with each hour. She checked on Lily between orders, finding her daughter had dozed off with her head pillowed on her math homework. The sight made Clara's chest tight. Her little girl spent too many nights like this, waiting for her mother to finish work. Finally, at 11:30 p.m., Clara hung up her apron. She gathered her sleeping daughter in her arms, along with their belongings, and headed for the door. The rain had stopped, but the night air was chilly and damp. As she crossed the quiet street to her car, she didn't notice the man in the dark suit standing in the shadows of the building across the way. He watched intently as Clara carefully settled Lily in the back seat, then climbed behind the wheel of her old Honda. The man pulled out a small notebook, wrote something down, and disappeared into the night, just as Clara's taillights faded around the corner. The exhausted single mother drove home through the empty streets, unaware that her simple act of kindness earlier that day had set larger wheels in motion. The ancient radiator clanked and hissed in protest as morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains of Clara's small apartment. She stood at the cramped kitchen counter, spreading peanut butter on slightly stale bread while trying to keep her eyes open. The night shift at the diner always left her feeling like she was walking through fog the next morning. "Mom, can I have the strawberry jam?" Lily asked from their small folding table, already dressed in her school uniform, her dark hair neatly braided. Clara smiled, reaching for the nearly empty jar. "Of course, sweetie. But remember, we need to make it last until payday." The old radio on their windowsill crackled with the morning news, its sound occasionally cutting in and out. Clara absently twisted the antenna, trying to improve the reception. And in local news, Governor Henry Caldwell continues his unannounced visits throughout the state. The radio announcer's voice came through clearer. Sources say the governor has been appearing in disguise at various locations, testing the compassion of everyday citizens. Clara shook her head, half listening as she packed Lily's lunch. "Politicians," she muttered under her breath, "always putting on shows." "What's compassion mean, Mom?" Lily asked, carefully spreading a thin layer of jam on her bread. "It's when you care about others and help them," Clara explained, running her fingers through her daughter's hair to smooth a few loose strands. "Like when you shared your pencils with Tommy last week when he forgot his." Lily beamed at the memory. "Or like when you helped that nice man in the wheelchair yesterday?" Clara's cheeks warmed. "That was nothing special, honey, just being decent." She glanced at the clock on the wall, its plastic face slightly cracked. "Finish up your breakfast. We don't want to be late." The sound of mail dropping through their letterbox made Lily jump up from her chair. "I'll get it." "Careful with the jam," Clara called after her, but Lily was already halfway to the door, her breakfast forgotten. Lily came skipping back, clutching a small stack of envelopes. "Bills, bills." She sorted through them with the authority of someone who'd watched her mother do it countless times. Then she stopped, her eyes widening. "Mom, look at this one. It's fancy." Clara took the cream-colored envelope from her daughter's hands. It was indeed different from their usual mail, thick, expensive paper with elegant gold lettering. Her name and address were written in perfect calligraphy. "Open it, Mom!" Lily bounced on her toes, practically vibrating with excitement. Clara's fingers hesitated on the seal. Experience had taught her that anything too good to be true usually was. But Lily's eager face made her relent. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a heavy cardstock invitation. "You are cordially invited," she read aloud, "to attend the annual Community Heroes Recognition Dinner this Saturday evening at the Grand Plaza Hotel." She trailed off, frowning at the words. "A hero dinner," Lily clapped her hands. "That's because you helped the wheelchair man." Clara set the invitation down on their scratched kitchen table. "Honey, this has to be some kind of mistake. Or maybe it's one of those marketing things trying to sell something." "But it looks real," Lily protested, picking up the invitation and running her fingers over the raised letters. "See? It has a golden seal and everything." "Sweetie," Clara began gently, "these kinds of fancy events aren't for people like us. Besides, I'd have nothing to wear, and we can't afford a babysitter. I could stay with Mrs. Rodriguez next door. She always says I can visit," Lily argued, her lower lip beginning to tremble. "And you have that pretty blue dress from Cousin Sarah?" Clara sighed, gathering their breakfast dishes. The dress her cousin had given her was years old, and probably had moth holes by now. "We'll see," she said, using every mother's favorite non-answer. "Right now, We need to focus on getting you to school." But Lily wasn't ready to let it go. While Clara washed the dishes, her daughter stood on tiptoe to reach the invitation. "Can I at least look at it in the car?" "Fine," Clara agreed, too tired to argue. "But be careful with it. If it's real, we should probably return it to whoever sent it by mistake." As they gathered their things, Lily's worn backpack, Clara's purse with its broken strap that she'd mended 3 times, she watched her daughter carefully fold the invitation and slip it into her backpack's front pocket. "Promise you'll think about it?" Lily asked, as they headed down the apartment building's creaky stairs. "Really think about it?" Clara helped her daughter zip up her jacket against the morning chill. "I promise to think about it," she said, knowing she'd already made up her mind. Things like fancy dinners and recognition ceremonies belonged to a different world, one that had no place for a struggling single mom who could barely keep her electricity on. But as they walked to their old car, Clara caught sight of Lily's reflection in the window. Her daughter was patting her backpack pocket, a determined little smile on her face. Clara recognized that look. It was the same one Lily wore when she decided something was absolutely definitely going to happen, no matter what anyone else said. The invitation might be safely hidden in Lily's backpack for now, but Clara had a feeling this wouldn't be the last she heard about it. As she started the car, its engine protesting with a familiar rattle, she glanced in the rearview mirror to see Lily in the back seat, her small hand still resting protectively over her backpack pocket. The radio crackled back to life as they pulled away from the curb. "And remember, citizens are encouraged to report acts of kindness in their communities." Clara reached over and turned it off, focusing instead on the day ahead, trying to push thoughts of fancy invitations and impossible dinners from her mind. Clara's knees ached as she scrubbed the office bathroom floor, the sharp smell of cleaning products filling her nostrils. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the institutional gray tiles. Her yellow rubber gloves were getting worn, another expense she'd have to deal with soon. From the hallway, voices drifted in. 2 office workers on their coffee break stood just outside, their conversation clear through the open door. "I heard the governor's been going around in disguise," one woman said, "testing people to see if they'll help someone in need." "My sister's friend swears she saw him at the grocery store last week," the other replied. "Dressed like a homeless man, seeing if anyone would buy him food." Clara's hands slowed on the floor as she listened. The veteran from yesterday flashed in her mind, his weathered face, the quiet dignity in his eyes despite his struggles with the wheelchair. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. The governor had better things to do than wheel around testing random people's kindness. The office workers moved on, their heels clicking down the hallway, but their words lingered. Clara sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead with her forearm. Her back protested as she stood, gathering her cleaning supplies. The cart's wheels squeaked as she pushed it toward the next bathroom on her route. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Clara peeled off one rubber glove and fished it out, her heart sinking when she saw the number. Mr. Peterson, her landlord. "Hello?" She tried to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Thompson." His tone was clipped, businesslike. "Your rent check is 4 days late." Clara closed her eyes, leaning against the wall. "I know, Mr. Peterson. I get paid Friday. I can have it to you then." This is becoming a pattern. She could hear papers shuffling. 3 months in a row now. "I'm sorry, Friday," he cut her off. "And not a day later. I've been patient, but there are other families who'd love this apartment." The line went dead. Clara's hand trembled as she slipped the phone back into her pocket. The threat in his words was clear. One more late payment, and she and Lily could end up homeless. She glanced at her watch. 3 more hours of cleaning, then she had to pick up Lily from the after-school program. The program director had already warned her twice about being late with those payments, too. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders as she moved through the offices, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces. Every bill felt like another brick in a wall that was slowly closing in around her. The electric company's final notice sat unopened on her kitchen counter. Lily needed new shoes for school. The car was making that worrying noise again. Clara's vision blurred as she sprayed glass cleaner on yet another window. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it back. She couldn't break down here. There wasn't time for tears. The rest of her shift passed in a fog of exhaustion and worry. By the time she picked up Lily, the sky had turned the deep purple of early evening. They climbed the 3 flights to their apartment, Lily chattering about her day, while Clara tried to summon the energy to make dinner from whatever was left in their nearly empty fridge. "Mom?" Lily's voice cut through Clara's mental calculations of bills versus paychecks. "Are you listening?" "Sorry, sweetie." Clara managed a tired smile as she unlocked their door. "What were you saying?" Instead of answering, Lily dropped her backpack and dug through it, pulling out the cream-colored envelope from yesterday. The elegant script caught the light as she held it up. "We have to go, Mom," Lily said, her eyes bright with hope. "It's tomorrow night." Clara sank onto their worn couch, the springs creaking beneath her. "Honey, I don't think." "Please?" Lily climbed up next to her, pressing close. "Maybe this is God's way of giving us hope. Like Pastor Mike always says at church, sometimes help comes from unexpected places." Clara looked down at her daughter's earnest face, then at the invitation in her small hands. The paper was thick, expensive, so different from the bills and final notices that usually filled their mailbox. Part of her wanted to believe in the possibility it represented, even while her practical side screamed that it was too good to be true. Lily leaned her head against Clara's arm. "You always tell me to have faith," she whispered. Clara's throat tightened. She did say that, didn't she? Every night when they prayed together, every Sunday at church, every time Lily worried about their situation. What kind of example would she set by refusing this invitation out of fear? "Okay," Clara said finally, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. A long sigh escaped her. "Okay, we'll go." Lily's face lit up with joy. "Really? Really?" Clara managed a small smile, pushing aside her doubts. "But I have nothing to wear to a fancy dinner." "You can wear your Christmas dress." Lily bounced on the couch. "The blue one. You look like a princess in it." Clara laughed despite herself, the sound rusty from disuse. The dress was hardly princess material, bought on clearance 2 years ago. But Lily's enthusiasm was infectious. "And I'll help you do your hair," Lily continued, practically vibrating with excitement. "Like we practiced with my dolls." Clara pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe this was a sign, a small light in the darkness that had been pressing in around them. Or maybe it would turn out to be nothing but a strange prank or mistake. Either way, she realized, they needed this moment of hope, this tiny chance to believe in something better. Even if just for one evening. Clara stood before her neighbor's full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself in the borrowed navy blue dress. Mrs. Martinez had insisted she take it, along with a pair of sensible black heels that pinched her toes. "You look like a princess, Mommy," Lily beamed, wearing her Sunday best, a pink dress that was starting to get too short at the ankles. "I don't know about that, sweetie." Clara's fingers worried at a loose thread on the dress's sleeve. "Maybe we shouldn't go." "We have to." The letter said it was important. Lily grabbed her mother's hand, tugging her toward the door with the determination only an 8-year-old could muster. The taxi ride to the Grand Palmer Hotel stretched their budget, but walking wasn't an option in these shoes. Clara's heart pounded as they pulled up to the gleaming building. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through tall windows, and well-dressed people streamed through the brass-handled doors. "Your invitation, ma'am?" A doorman in a crisp uniform extended his hand. Clara fumbled in her worn purse, fishing out the cream-colored envelope. Her hands trembled as she handed it over. The man studied it, his eyebrows rising slightly, before nodding them through. The ballroom took Clara's breath away. Round tables draped in white linen dotted the space, each set with sparkling glasses and silver cutlery that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The ceiling soared overhead, more chandeliers casting warm light across the crowd of elegantly dressed guests. "Look at all the pretty dresses," Lily whispered, though her whisper carried enough for nearby guests to turn and stare. Clara felt their eyes like physical touches, questioning, judging. A woman in diamonds and a red designer dress wrinkled her nose, whispering behind her hand to her companion. A man in a tuxedo gave Clara's borrowed dress a dismissive once-over. "Let's find our seats, honey." Clara gripped Lily's hand tighter, searching for their table number. They wound through the crowd, each step feeling more out of place than the last. "Table 12, Clara murmured, relief flooding her as they found their assigned spots. She helped Lily into her chair, then sank into her own, trying to make herself as small as possible. "Mommy, look at all the forks," Lily giggled, pointing at the place setting. "Which one do we use first?" "I'm not sure, sweetie." Clara's cheeks burned. She should have looked up proper table etiquette before coming. "Maybe we should—" A sudden hush fell over the room as a figure appeared at the podium. Clara's eyes widened. Her heart stopped, then started again with a thundering beat. It was him. The veteran she'd helped across the street, but transformed. Gone was the wheelchair, the old jacket, the frail demeanor. Instead, he stood tall and distinguished in a perfectly tailored suit, his silver hair neatly combed, his bearing commanding respect. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." His voice carried easily across the suddenly silent room. "I'm Governor Henry Caldwell, and I want to thank you all for coming tonight." Clara's mind reeled. The veteran was the governor? She'd helped the governor across the street? Her hands clutched the edge of the table, the room seeming to spin around her. "As many of you know," Governor Caldwell continued, "I've been conducting a series of, let's call them, social experiments, testing the compassion of our citizens, seeing who would help a stranger in need without expectation of reward or recognition." He paused, his eyes scanning the room until they found Clara. A warm smile spread across his face. Many walked past, many looked away, but one person didn't. One person, despite being late for work, despite carrying groceries in the rain, despite her own obvious struggles, stopped to help what she thought was just a disabled veteran cross the street. The spotlight found her, and Clara wanted to sink through the floor. Lily beamed beside her, practically bouncing in her seat. "Clara Thompson," the governor said, "would you please stand?" Her legs felt like jelly. But somehow Clara rose to her feet. The spotlight was blinding, the faces of the crowd a blur of judgment and curiosity. "Miss Thompson showed us what true compassion looks like. Not the kind that comes with tax write-offs or public recognition, but the simple, pure act of helping another human being, even when it costs you something to do so." Applause erupted, echoing off the high ceiling. Clara stood frozen, her face burning, her heart racing. She didn't deserve this attention, this praise. She'd just done what anyone would do, hadn't she? The applause continued as Governor Caldwell made his way through the crowd toward her table. He moved with a slight limp. Perhaps not entirely a disguise after all, she realized. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "Thank you, Miss Thompson," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, meant for her ears alone. "I need your help with something bigger." Clara stared at him, her mind blank with shock. The governor of the state needed her help? Her, a single mom who could barely make ends meet, who worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over her daughter's head. The room continued to applaud, the sound washing over her like waves. Lily tugged at her dress, grinning up at her with pure pride. But Clara could only focus on the governor's words, echoing in her head. Something bigger. What could someone like her possibly have to offer? The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and fine china, making Clara feel even more out of place in her borrowed dress. She sat rigidly at the elegantly set table, her daughter Lily beside her, while Governor Henry Caldwell stood at the podium, addressing the gathered crowd. "Friends," Henry's voice carried through the room with quiet authority, "what we've witnessed tonight goes beyond simple acts of kindness. It shows us the true heart of our community." His eyes found Clara's across the room. "And that's why I'm announcing a new initiative, one that will transform how we help our struggling neighborhoods." Clara shifted uncomfortably in her chair as dozens of well-dressed guests turned to look at her. The weight of their stares made her cheeks burn. Lily, however, sat up straighter, beaming with pride. Henry descended from the podium, making his way to their table. He pulled out an empty chair and sat down, his movements showing a hint of stiffness from his earlier concealed injuries. "Clara," he said warmly, "I'd like you to be part of our advisory committee." "Me?" Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. She glanced down at her borrowed dress, at her weathered hands that showed years of hard work. "I don't understand." "You have something we desperately need," Henry continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Real experience. You know what families are going through because you're living it. That perspective is invaluable." A sharp laugh cut through the air. "Experience." A woman in an expensive silk suit stood up from a nearby table. "Governor, with all due respect, shouldn't we have qualified professionals leading this initiative?" Clara's throat tightened. She recognized the woman Margaret Wellington, a prominent local business owner who frequently appeared in the society pages. The same woman who had given her a dismissive look when she'd first entered the ballroom. "And what qualifications would those be, Margaret?" Henry's voice carried a hint of steel beneath its diplomatic tone. "Degrees? Bank accounts? Or perhaps the ability to recognize genuine need when we see it?" Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "I simply mean that complex social programs require expertise. Experience in grant writing, program management. Mom helps lots of people." Lily's clear voice rang out, making Clara's heart skip. "She shares our food with Mr. Jenkins when his checks are late, and she helped Mrs. Rodriguez fill out her medicine forms and—" "Lily," Clara whispered, squeezing her daughter's hand under the table. But Henry was smiling. "That's exactly what I mean," he said, addressing the room. "Real compassion happens in these small moments. It happens when people who are struggling themselves still find ways to help others." He turned back to Clara, his expression serious. "The initiative will focus on practical support helping families with housing, job training, childcare. But more than that, we want to build connections between all parts of our community, break down the walls that separate us." Clara's mind raced. She thought of her morning rush between jobs, the constant juggling of bills, the nights she lay awake wondering how to make ends meet. "I wouldn't know where to start," she admitted. "You already have," Henry replied. "That day at the crosswalk, you didn't know who I was. You helped because it was the right thing to do. That's the spirit we need to encourage." Another voice spoke up, this one belonging to a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. "And what about her background? Have we done any proper vetting?" Clara's hands began to tremble. There was so much they didn't know: the failed marriage, the mounting debts, the constant fear of eviction. She waited for Henry to withdraw his offer, to realize his mistake. Instead, he stood up slowly, authority radiating from his bearing. "I've done all the vetting I need to do. I've seen her character firsthand, which is more than I can say for some who hide behind their credentials." The room fell silent. Clara felt tears pricking at her eyes, but Lily's warm hand in hers kept her grounded. "The committee meets twice a month," Henry continued, pulling out a business card and sliding it across the table to her. "We'll provide transportation and childcare if needed. Take some time to think about it." Clara stared at the card, its official seal gleaming under the chandelier lights. Everything in her wanted to run, to hide from these wealthy people with their judgmental stares. But then she felt Lily squeeze her hand again, and she remembered what her daughter had said earlier about hope. As the dinner wound down, Clara stood up, gathering her borrowed purse and helping Lily with her coat. Her head spun with everything that had happened: the revelation about Henry's identity, the cruel comments, his surprising defense of her. "Ready to go home, baby?" she asked Lily, who nodded sleepily. They made their way toward the exit, passing tables where some guests still whispered behind their hands. Clara held her head high, though her heart pounded. The business card felt heavy in her purse, like it carried the weight of all the possibilities and all the fears that lay ahead. At the door, she paused for a moment, looking back at the glittering ballroom. Henry caught her eye from across the room and gave her a small, encouraging nod. Clara managed a tiny smile in return before stepping out into the cool night air with Lily. The stars shone brightly overhead as they waited for their bus, Clara holding Lily's hand tight. Everything familiar about her life suddenly felt different, shifted somehow, as if the ground beneath her feet had tilted slightly on its axis. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew with absolute certainty that there was no going back to the way things were before. The morning sun filtered through the threadbare curtains of Clara's small apartment, casting tired shadows across her worn kitchen table. She stared at her coffee mug, the events of last night's dinner playing over and over in her mind, like a movie she couldn't quite believe was real. "Mom, have you seen my other sock?" Lily's voice rang out from their shared bedroom. "The blue one with the stars?" Clara blinked, grateful for the interruption. "Check under your bed, sweetie, and hurry up, we're running late for school." The familiar morning rush helped push away thoughts of crystal chandeliers and the governor's unexpected request. Clara packed Lily's lunch, a simple peanut butter sandwich and an apple, while trying to ignore the fancy invitation card still sitting on their counter. The phone rang, making her jump. Clara hesitated, then picked it up. "Hello, is this Miss Thompson?" A crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, this is she. I'm calling from Governor Caldwell's office. The governor would like you to attend an orientation meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. for the new community initiative. Would that be possible?" Clara's stomach tightened. I have work at the diner at 3. The governor specifically requested your presence. The meeting shouldn't last more than an hour." She glanced at the stack of bills by the phone. She couldn't afford to lose either of her jobs, but turning down the governor seemed impossible too. I'll try to make it," she said finally. After dropping Lily at school, Clara spent her morning cleaning offices, her mind wandering to the upcoming meeting. What would they expect from her? She scrubbed floors and emptied trash bins, imagining all the ways she could embarrass herself in front of important people. At 1:45 p.m., Clara stood outside the imposing government building, smoothing her only decent blouse, a navy button-up she'd found at the thrift store. Her hands trembled slightly as she pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby was all marble and mahogany, with a security desk where a guard checked her ID and directed her to the 3rd floor. Clara's worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she made her way to Conference Room B. The room was already half full when she arrived. About 20 people sat around a large oval table, most wearing expensive suits or designer dresses. Clara slipped into an empty chair near the door, acutely aware of her discount store clothes. A woman with perfectly styled silver hair gave her a dismissive glance. "I believe the custodial staff meeting is down the hall," she said loudly enough for others to hear. Heat rushed to Clara's face. I'm here for the community initiative meeting," she managed to say. "Oh." The woman's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. "How interesting." Before Clara could respond, Governor Henry Caldwell entered the room. He moved with purpose despite his slight limp, commanding attention without asking for it. Clara noticed he wasn't using the wheelchair from their first meeting. It had been part of his disguise. "Welcome, everyone," Henry began, his voice warm but authoritative. "Thank you for joining our first orientation meeting. Each of you was chosen because you demonstrated genuine compassion in your community." Clara shifted uncomfortably as several people glanced her way. Henry outlined the initiative's goals, identifying struggling neighborhoods, coordinating volunteer efforts, and building bridges between different social classes. As he spoke, Clara's anxiety grew. The other volunteers shared impressive credentials: business owners, charity board members, civic leaders. "What exactly is your background in community service?" A man in an expensive suit asked Clara during the group discussion. Clara's voice caught. "I work at Miller's Diner and clean offices. I help where I can." Murmurs rippled through the room. The silver-haired woman exchanged knowing looks with her neighbors. "So you have no actual experience?" Someone else pressed. "That's not true." Henry's voice cut through the tension. "Miss Thompson has extensive experience in what matters most, understanding the daily struggles of the people we're trying to help. She lives it. That perspective is invaluable to our initiative." Clara stared at her lap, her cheeks burning. The meeting continued, but she barely heard the rest, too focused on holding back tears. As the meeting wound down and people began gathering their things, Henry approached her chair. "Miss Thompson, could you stay for a moment?" Clara nodded, her throat tight. Once the room cleared, Henry sat in the chair next to her. "I saw what happened," he said quietly. "I know this isn't easy." "I don't belong here," Clara whispered. "They're right. I don't have any experience. I'm just a waitress who helped an old man cross the street." Henry's face softened. "That's exactly why you belong here. You helped me that day not because you wanted recognition or had something to gain. You helped because it was the right thing to do, even though it meant being late for work, even though you were struggling yourself." He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "Clara, those people out there? They know how to organize galas and write checks, but you know what it means to choose between paying the electric bill or buying new shoes for your child. You understand what real need looks like. That knowledge, that empathy, is worth more than all their credentials combined." Clara looked up, meeting his steady gaze. For the first time, she saw past his title to the man who had sat in that wheelchair in the rain, testing the hearts of his citizens. "The people we want to help," Henry continued. "They need someone who speaks their language, who's walked in their shoes. They need you, Clara. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Clara sat in the back row of the community center's meeting room, her hands fidgeting with the worn notebook in her lap. Around her, well-dressed community leaders and donors filled the rows of chairs, their polished appearances making her feel even more out of place in her faded blue sweater. Henry stood at the podium, discussing statistics about poverty in their state. The numbers were just that, numbers. Clara knew the real stories behind them. She'd lived them. "Now," Henry said, his voice carrying across the room, "I'd like to hear from someone who understands these challenges firsthand. Clara, would you share your perspective?" Clara's heart jumped into her throat. She hadn't expected to speak today. The room fell silent as all heads turned toward her. She could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, others skeptical. With trembling legs, Clara made her way to the front. The walk felt endless. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, drawing a few disapproving glances from the front row. She began, her voice barely a whisper. Clara cleared her throat and tried again. "I know what it's like to choose between buying medicine for your child or paying the electric bill." A woman in an expensive suit shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Clara saw her whisper something to her neighbor, who rolled her eyes. But Henry's encouraging nod gave her strength. Clara took a deep breath and continued. "Last winter, my daughter Lily and I went 3 weeks without heat because I couldn't afford the gas bill. We slept in the same bed, wrapped in every blanket we owned. Lily never complained, but I saw her doing her homework wearing mittens." A man in the third row scoffed loudly. "Come on," he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Surely there are programs for that sort of thing." "You must be exaggerating." Clara's cheeks burned. She gripped the podium tighter, her knuckles turning white. "Sir, have you ever tried navigating those programs while working 2 jobs? Have you spent hours on hold, only to be told you need documentation you can't get because you can't take time off work?" Another donor, a woman wearing a string of pearls, raised her hand. "But surely if you just budgeted better, that's enough." Henry's voice cut through the room like steel. He stood up from his chair and walked to stand beside Clara. "This is exactly why we needed Miss Thompson here today. You can read all the statistics you want, but until you hear from someone who's lived it, you don't truly understand." Clara felt tears threatening to spill but blinked them back. She wouldn't cry. "Not here." "Please continue, Clara," Henry said softly. Drawing strength from his support, Clara straightened her shoulders. "Last month, a little boy came into the diner where I work. He ordered just a glass of water and sat there for hours doing his homework. I recognized that look in his eyes. He was hungry, but trying not to show it. I made him a grilled cheese sandwich on my break and paid for it myself." The room had grown quiet now. Really quiet. "That's the reality in our community," Clara continued, her voice growing stronger. "There are children going hungry, families choosing between food and rent, parents working themselves to exhaustion just to keep the lights on. These aren't just statistics, they're our neighbors." To her surprise, several heads nodded. Even the pearl-wearing woman looked thoughtful now. "What do you think we should do?" someone asked from the back. This time, the question held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. Clara looked at the faces around her. We need to make help more accessible. Maybe mobile assistance units that can go to neighborhoods where people can't afford transportation. Evening hours for working parents. Simple applications that don't require a law degree to understand. Henry smiled. These are exactly the kind of practical solutions we need. Thank you, Clara. This is why your voice is so valuable to this initiative. As Clara returned to her seat, she noticed something had changed. Some of the donors who had sneered earlier were now taking notes. Others were nodding thoughtfully. A few even smiled at her. After the meeting, several people approached her to ask more questions about her experiences. Their genuine interest surprised her. Even the man who had scoffed came up to apologize, admitting he had never considered the practical barriers to accessing help. The sun had set by the time Clara finally left the community center. Her nerves were still jangling from speaking in public, but underneath that was a new feeling, something like pride. When she picked up Lily from the after-school program, her daughter took one look at her face and broke into a wide smile. "Did something good happen, Mom?" Clara nodded, still processing the events of the afternoon. Back in their small apartment, as Clara heated up leftover soup for dinner, Lily wrapped her arms around her mother's waist in a tight hug. "Mom, I'm proud of you," she said, her voice muffled against Clara's sweater. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the soup on the stove. She allowed herself a rare smile, running her fingers through Lily's hair. For the first time, in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, her voice mattered. The morning sun cast long shadows across the community center's parking lot as Clara helped unload boxes of donated food from a delivery truck. Her arms ached, but she kept moving, determined to get everything set up before the families arrived. Inside, volunteers in matching t-shirts arranged tables, while Henry coordinated with local organizers. "Clara, could you help me with these registration forms?" called Sarah, one of the coordinators, waving from the welcome desk. Clara nodded, grateful for a brief break from the heavy lifting. As she sorted through papers, she noticed how different this felt from her usual volunteer work at the church food pantry. Everything here seemed more organized, more official, and more intimidating. The first families began arriving shortly after 9. Clara recognized that look in their eyes, the mixture of hope and shame she'd felt herself so many times. A young mother with 3 small children approached the registration table, her shoulders hunched. "Hi there," Clara said warmly, stepping forward. "I'm Clara. Let me help you get signed in." The woman's tension visibly eased at Clara's gentle tone. As Clara walked her through the process, they chatted about their kids, about the rising cost of groceries, about the struggle to make ends meet. Clara shared her own experiences of stretching a food budget, making the woman smile for the first time. "I never thought I'd be here," the woman confessed quietly. "I know exactly how you feel," Clara replied, touching her arm. "I've been there too. But we're all just helping each other get through, right?" More families filtered in, and Clara found herself naturally moving between tables, helping people find what they needed, listening to their stories. An elderly man told her about raising his grandchildren after his daughter's accident. A teenager explained how he was trying to help his single dad make it work. Each story resonated with Clara's own struggles. She didn't notice the news crew at first. They moved through the crowd quietly, their camera catching moments of interaction. It wasn't until she was deep in conversation with a group of mothers, sharing tips about stretching groceries and finding affordable after-school activities, that she realized they were filming her. "Miss Thompson," the reporter said, stepping forward with a microphone, "could you tell us about your role in Governor Caldwell's initiative?" Clara froze for a moment, her heart racing. But then she looked at the mothers around her, saw their encouraging nods, and found her voice. "I'm just here to help," she said simply. "I know what it's like to struggle, to worry about feeding your child, to feel like you're alone. But we're not alone. That's what this is, about neighbors helping neighbors." The words flowed naturally as she continued, speaking from her heart about the dignity of hard work, the pain of asking for help, and the strength she found in community. She forgot about the camera, focused instead on the nodding heads and tear-filled eyes around her. "Sometimes people look at poverty like it's some distant problem," she said, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. But we're your neighbors, your co-workers, the parents at your children's schools. We work hard, we love our kids, we want to contribute. We just need a little help sometimes, and there's no shame in that." Throughout the day, Clara continued working. Unaware that the news crew had captured something special, she helped elderly visitors carry their boxes to their cars, entertained children while their parents filled out forms, and shared countless hugs and words of encouragement. By evening, Clara's feet ached as she helped clean up the community center. Henry approached her with a warm smile. "You did amazing work today, Clara," he said. "The way you connected with people, that's exactly what this initiative needs." Clara blushed, shaking her head. "I just talk to them like normal people because that's what we are." "That's precisely why you're so valuable here," Henry insisted. "Watch the news tonight. I think you'll be surprised." Later that evening, Clara sat on her worn couch with Lily, both still tired from helping at the event. The local news came on, and suddenly there she was on the screen, speaking with such passion and conviction that she hardly recognized herself. "Mom!" Lily squealed, grabbing her arm. "You're on TV!" Clara watched in stunned silence as the reporter praised her authentic approach and highlighted her as the heart of the governor's new initiative. The footage showed her helping families, sharing stories, offering hugs, all the small moments she hadn't realized were being captured. "That's what makes Clara Thompson special," the reporter concluded. "She brings not just help, but understanding and dignity to those in need." "Mom, you're crying," Lily said softly, snuggling closer. Clara wiped her eyes, overwhelmed by seeing herself through others' eyes. On screen, she looked confident, compassionate, strong, everything she'd never felt herself to be. The woman on TV didn't look like someone who struggled to pay bills or worried about making rent. She looked like someone who made a difference. "They really see you, Mom," Lily whispered, hugging her tight. "Just like I do." Clara held her daughter close, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite name. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she did have something valuable to offer after all. The news segment ended, but Clara continued staring at the screen, processing what she'd just seen. Her phone began buzzing with messages from coworkers and friends who'd seen the broadcast. Even her landlord sent a congratulatory text. "Can we watch it again?" Lily asked excitedly, reaching for the remote. Clara laughed, still wiping away tears. "Maybe just one more time," she said, marveling at how a simple day of doing what came naturally to her had somehow turned into something so much bigger. Clara stared at her reflection in the community center's bathroom mirror, her hands trembling as she smoothed down her borrowed navy blazer. The distant murmur of the gathering crowd in the main hall made her stomach churn. Hundreds of people had shown up for Governor Caldwell's town hall meeting, and in 15 minutes she was supposed to speak to all of them. "I can't do this," she whispered, gripping the edge of the sink. The fluorescent lights highlighted the dark circles under her eyes from too many late shifts at the diner. The bathroom door creaked open, and Lily's bright face appeared. "Mom, everyone's waiting. Are you okay?" Clara forced a wobbly smile. "Maybe we should go home, sweetie. I'm not feeling so great." Lily marched over and took her mother's hand. "Remember what you always tell me about my school presentations? Being scared means it matters." She squeezed Clara's fingers. "And you matter, Mom. Your story matters." Clara's eyes welled up at her daughter's words. When had her little girl gotten so wise? She knelt down to Lily's level, the bathroom's cold tiles pressing against her knees. "When did you get so grown up, huh? Someone has to take care of you sometimes," Lily said with a cheeky grin. "Come on, I'll sit in the front row. Just look at me if you get nervous." Outside the bathroom, Henry was waiting in the hallway, his formal suit at odds with his kind, weathered face. "There you are," he said warmly. "Ready to change some hearts and minds?" Clara clutched her note cards. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this, Governor. These people, they're not going to want to hear from someone like me." "That's exactly why they need to hear from you," Henry said firmly. "And please, it's just Henry." He gestured to his aide, who was hovering nearby with a concerned expression. "Even Marcus agrees, and he doesn't agree with me on much." The aide's lips twitched in a reluctant smile. "The governor is right. Your authenticity is what makes you powerful, Miss Thompson." The main hall was packed, every folding chair filled with local officials, business owners, and community members. Camera flashes popped as Henry took the podium, his presence commanding immediate attention. Clara hung back in the wings, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Today, we're here to discuss the heart of our community," Henry began, his voice strong and steady. "Not buildings or budgets, but the invisible threads that bind us together. The small acts of kindness that often go unnoticed." He paused, scanning the crowd. "I'd like to introduce you to someone who embodies this spirit. A woman who didn't help me for recognition or reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Please welcome Clara Thompson." The applause felt distant as Clara walked to the podium on shaky legs. She found Lily's face in the front row, beaming with pride, and took a deep breath. "I'm not used to speaking in public," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone adjusted the microphone, and she cleared her throat. "Most days, I'm serving coffee at Murphy's Diner or cleaning offices after hours. I'm more comfortable being invisible." The room grew still, and Clara felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. But when she looked at Lily again, something shifted inside her chest. "The day I helped the Gov. Henry across the street, I was already late for work. My grocery bags were getting soaked in the rain, and I knew my boss would be angry." Clara's voice grew stronger. "But I saw someone struggling, and in that moment, nothing else mattered, because I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to need help and have people look right through you." She set aside her note cards, the words flowing naturally now. "I've stood in food bank lines at midnight so my neighbors wouldn't see me. I've had to choose between buying my daughter new shoes or paying the electric bill. And yes, sometimes I've felt ashamed. But what I've learned is that dignity isn't about what you own or where you live. It's about how you treat others, especially when no one's watching." Tears glistened in the eyes of several audience members. An elderly woman in the third row nodded vigorously, dabbing at her cheeks with a tissue. "We all have something to give," Clara continued, warmth spreading through her chest. "Sometimes it's just a moment of your time, a kind word or a helping hand across a busy street. These small acts, they're like ripples in a pond. They spread further than we can see." She glanced at Henry, who gave her an encouraging nod. "When the governor asked me to be part of this initiative, I thought he was crazy." A gentle laugh rippled through the crowd. "What could someone like me offer? But now I understand. Change doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes it starts with one person, one moment, one choice to see someone else's humanity." The silence in the room was absolute as Clara finished speaking. "Thank you for listening to my story. I hope," her voice caught slightly, "I hope it reminds you that heroes don't always wear suits or uniforms. Sometimes they're the person serving your coffee, or cleaning your office, or just trying their best to make it through another day." For a moment, no one moved. Then someone started clapping, and suddenly the whole room erupted in applause. People stood up, their faces shining with emotion. In the front row, Lily jumped to her feet, clapping so hard her pigtails bounced. Henry stepped forward, taking Clara's hand and raising it slightly as the applause continued to roll through the room like thunder. His grip was warm and steady, anchoring her as the cameras flashed and the crowd continued to cheer. Clara looked out at the sea of faces, some crying, some smiling, all fully present, and felt something shift inside her. The constant knot of anxiety in her chest began to loosen. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible or ashamed. She felt like someone who could make a difference. The late afternoon sun streamed through the community center's windows, casting warm shadows across the bustling room. Clara stood near the refreshment table, her posture more relaxed than it had been in weeks. She wore a simple blue dress, still borrowed, but this time she didn't feel quite so out of place in it. Around her, families chatted and mingled, while volunteers distributed information packets about the governor's initiative. "Miss Thompson?" A young mother approached, holding the hand of a small boy. "I just wanted to say thank you. After hearing you speak last week, I finally got the courage to apply for that nursing program." Clara's eyes softened. "That's wonderful. How's it going?" "I start next month." The woman's eyes glistened. Your story about working 2 jobs while raising Lily, it made me realize I wasn't alone. More people gathered around Clara, sharing their own stories. An elderly man told her about helping his neighbors with groceries. A teenager described starting a homework club for younger kids. Each story touched Clara's heart, reminding her why she'd agreed to be part of this project despite her initial fears. Governor Henry Caldwell stood at the podium, his presence commanding yet approachable. "Today marks our 3rd community outreach event," he announced, "and I'm proud to say we've already seen remarkable changes. But rather than listen to me, I'd like to invite someone special to speak, someone who embodies the spirit of this initiative. Clara Thompson, would you join me?" Clara made her way to the stage, her steps steady. 8-year-old Lily trailed behind her, refusing to sit with the volunteers as usual. Clara had long since given up trying to convince her daughter to stay in the audience. Somehow, Lily's presence always gave her strength. "Thank you, Governor," Clara said into the microphone, her voice clear and confident. "When I first started this journey, I was scared. Terrified, actually." A knowing chuckle rippled through the crowd. "But what I've learned is that compassion isn't about having everything figured out. It's about recognizing that we're all human, all struggling in our own ways, and all capable of helping each other." As Clara continued her speech, she noticed several prominent donors in the audience nodding approvingly. The CEO of a local construction company wiped away a tear. Even the skeptical city council member who had initially opposed the initiative was leaning forward, engaged. "The truth is," Clara continued, "sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, like when Mommy helps people even when we don't have much." Lily suddenly piped up, grabbing the microphone. Her clear voice rang through the hall. "Sometimes we eat mac and cheese for 3 days, but Mommy still gives our neighbor Mrs. Martinez rides to her doctor's appointments." Clara's cheeks flushed, but before she could react, the audience erupted in applause. Several people jumped to their feet. Others dabbed at their eyes. The applause grew louder, turning into a standing ovation. Governor Caldwell stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Thank you, young lady," he said, smiling. "Sometimes it takes a child's honesty to remind us what true generosity looks like." The rest of the event passed in a blur of handshakes and heartfelt conversations. Business owners approached with offers of support. A local grocery chain pledged to donate food to the initiative's pantry program. Even the resistant council member came forward to discuss expanding the project into neighboring counties. As the crowd began to thin, Clara felt a tugging at her dress. Lily looked up at her with hopeful eyes. "Mom, can we get ice cream, please? You promised if I was good." Clara laughed, a sound of pure joy she hadn't heard from herself in years. "Yes, sweetheart, I think we've earned some ice cream." They walked the 3 blocks to Murphy's Ice Cream Parlor, their favorite spot for special occasions, though they rarely could afford to visit. The bell jingled as they entered, and the familiar scent of waffle cones wrapped around them. "2 scoops of chocolate chip for me," Lily announced, pressing her nose against the glass display. "1 scoop," Clara corrected, but she was still smiling, "and I'll have a small vanilla." They settled into their usual booth by the window. Lily's ice cream already had chocolate smeared around her mouth, but her eyes sparkled with happiness. Clara watched her daughter, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the sunny day outside. "Mom?" Lily asked between bites. "Are you mad I told everyone about the mac and cheese?" Clara reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "No, sweetie, you told the truth, and sometimes that's exactly what people need to hear. And did you see how happy everyone was? They all stood up." Lily bounced in her seat. "Even that grumpy man in the gray suit." Clara laughed again, savoring her own ice cream. "Yes, I saw. You know what? I think you might have helped more people today than I did." "Nuh-uh." Lily shook her head firmly. "You help people every day. You're like a superhero, but instead of a cape, you wear your diner uniform." They giggled together, sharing spoonfuls of each other's ice cream and making plans for the weekend. For once, Clara didn't worry about the bills waiting at home or her upcoming work schedule. In this moment, watching her daughter's joy and feeling the lingering warmth of the day's success, she allowed herself to simply be happy. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the parlor's window, painting their small booth in golden light. Other customers came and went, the bell chiming cheerfully. Clara and Lily took their time, savoring not just the ice cream but the precious moments together, moments that felt different now, filled with new possibility and hope. The morning light crept through Clara's threadbare curtains, but something felt wrong. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, filled with missed calls and text messages. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the screen. "Oh no," she whispered, her throat tightening. The local news website's headline screamed at her in bold letters. "Fraud hero exposed. The dark truth behind governor's poster child." Below it, there was a photo of her helping Henry across the street that fateful day. But next to it were grainy pictures of eviction notices taped to her old apartment door. Clara's hands shook as she scrolled through the article. The tabloid reporters had dug deep, too deep. They'd uncovered everything she'd tried so hard to forget. 3 eviction notices in 5 years. A mountain of medical bills from when Lily had pneumonia. Her ex-husband's restraining order against her after their explosive divorce. "Mom?" Lily's sleepy voice came from the doorway. "Why aren't you dressed for work?" Clara quickly locked her phone screen. "Baby, I'm not feeling well today. Could you get yourself ready for school?" As soon as Lily disappeared into the bathroom, Clara's phone rang. It was Henry's assistant, Miss Thompson. The woman's voice was strained. "The governor wants you to know we're handling this, but for now, please don't make any public statements." The morning news shows were already running with the story. Clara watched in horror as reporters twisted her past into sensational headlines. They painted her as an opportunist, someone taking advantage of the governor's goodwill. "Sources say Clara Thompson has a history of financial irresponsibility," one reporter announced. "Can someone who can't manage their own life really be trusted to guide community initiatives?" The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Clara saw camera crews gathering in the hallway of her apartment building. She backed away, her heart pounding. More calls came in. The diner manager left a message suggesting she take some time off until things cool down. The office cleaning service simply texted that her services were no longer required. By mid-morning, social media was ablaze. People who had applauded her just yesterday were now sharing the tabloid stories with cruel comments. "Always knew something was off about her. What a joke. And we almost fell for it." This is what happens when you trust people from the wrong side of the tracks. Clara's neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, knocked softly on her door. "Clara, honey? There are reporters downstairs. They're asking everyone about you. What do you want me to say?" "Nothing," Clara whispered through the door. "Please, just say nothing." She watched through a crack in her curtains as sponsors' cars pulled away from the community center across the street. The initiative's banner was quickly taken down. Everything she'd helped build was crumbling. At noon, her phone lit up with a text from one of the wealthy volunteers. "Emergency meeting at 2 p.m. Your presence is not required." Clara sank onto her worn couch, pulling her knees to her chest. The walls of her small apartment seemed to close in around her. Bills from last month lay scattered across her coffee table, the ones she'd hoped to pay off once the initiative's community liaison position became official. A reporter shouted through her door. "Miss Thompson, care to comment on your history of financial troubles? What about your ex-husband's allegations?" Clara pressed her hands against her ears, but she couldn't block out the voice of doubt growing in her mind. She thought of all the people who had started to believe in her, the families at the food bank, the children at the community center, even some of the donors who had finally begun to see past her worn clothes and simple ways. Now they would all know the truth. She wasn't a hero. She was just a struggling single mom who couldn't even keep her own life together. The afternoon sun faded into evening. Lily would be home from school soon. Clara had texted Mrs. Martinez to pick her up, not ready to face the reporters herself. The apartment grew darker, but Clara couldn't bring herself to turn on the lights. Bills rustled under her fingers as she sat at her small kitchen table. Each one was a reminder of her failures. The medical bills she couldn't pay. The rent she barely scraped together each month. The credit card debt that kept her awake at night. "Maybe they're right," she whispered into the darkness, her voice breaking. A tear rolled down her cheek, then another, until she could no longer hold back the flood of shame and despair that had been building all day. The woman who had stood proud at the town hall just days ago now sat alone in her darkened apartment, her dreams of making a difference shattered by the weight of her past. The blinds in Clara's small apartment remained drawn for the third straight day, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Her phone lay silent in a drawer, its battery dead. A fitting metaphor for how she felt inside. The newspaper that had destroyed her life sat crumpled in the trash, but its words still echoed in her mind. Failed marriage, multiple evictions, behind on bills, fraud hero. Clara sat curled up on her second-hand couch, wrapped in an old blanket despite the warm afternoon. The diner had left several messages about her missed shifts. She couldn't bear to face anyone, not after everything that had come out. "Mommy?" Lily's small voice came from the kitchen. "I made you a sandwich." Clara managed a weak smile as her daughter approached with a slightly messy peanut butter and jelly sandwich on a paper plate. Lily's face showed a mixture of worry and determination that no 8-year-old should have to wear. "Thank you, sweetheart," Clara whispered, her voice rough from disuse. She took the plate but couldn't bring herself to eat. Lily climbed onto the couch beside her. "Mrs. Martinez from next door asked about you again. She says people miss you at the community center." Clara's chest tightened. The community center, where just last week she'd stood proudly beside Governor Caldwell, talking about hope and change. Now the thought made her stomach turn. Her phone's message light blinked steadily in the drawer. Henry had called multiple times, but she couldn't face him. What must he think of her now? His community hero turned out to be nothing but a broke, divorced mess who couldn't even keep her electricity on some months. "Maybe we could go to the park?" Lily suggested, her small hand patting Clara's arm. "Just for a little while?" Clara shook her head. "Not today, honey. I'm not feeling well." The truth was, she couldn't bear the thought of seeing anyone. The grocery store clerk, the librarian, her neighbors, they'd all seen the articles. They all knew her shameful secrets now. Memories flooded back, standing in court during her divorce, clutching paperwork she barely understood. The afternoon her car was repossessed, leaving her to walk miles to work. The endless nights calculating and recalculating bills, trying to make impossible numbers work. She'd tried so hard to keep these struggles private, to maintain some dignity. Now everything was exposed, laid bare for the world to judge. The critics had been right all along. Who was she to represent anyone? To speak about community and hope when she could barely keep her own life together? Lily slid off the couch and retrieved her backpack, pulling out a slightly wrinkled drawing. "Look what I made in art class today. It's us, and there's Governor Henry too. We're all smiling." Clara's eyes welled up at the crayon figures holding hands. Lily had drawn her mother in a cape, like a superhero. If only she knew the truth, her mother was no hero. She was just a failure trying to pretend she was something more. The afternoon light faded into evening. Lily watched cartoons while Clara stared at the ceiling, remembering the town hall meeting where she'd felt so accepted, so valued. Now those same people probably laughed about her behind their hands. The wealthy donors who'd sneered at her had been right all along. Her landlord had called earlier, asking about the rent. Even that felt like another reminder of her inadequacy. She'd been late so many times before, juggling bills like a desperate circus act. The articles had spelled it all out in black and white. 3 eviction notices in 5 years, always just barely scraping by. "I'm going to make some hot chocolate," Lily announced, padding to the kitchen in her mismatched socks. "You want some, Mommy?" Before Clara could answer, a knock echoed through the apartment. Her heart jumped into her throat. Lily peered through the peephole. "Mom, it's Governor Henry, and he's got coffee." Clara froze. "No, Lily, don't." But Lily had already thrown open the door, revealing Henry Caldwell himself standing in their humble hallway. He wore casual clothes instead of his usual suit, and in his hands were 2 paper cups from the local coffee shop. "I thought you might need this," he said quietly, holding up the cups. "May I come in?" Clara pulled her blanket tighter, mortified at her unwashed hair and wrinkled clothes. But Lily was already ushering him inside with the enthusiasm only a child could muster after days of gloom. Clara's hands trembled as she gripped the chipped coffee mug Henry had brought. Steam rose between them at her small kitchen table, where mismatched chairs and a worn tablecloth spoke of her modest means. The governor looked oddly out of place in her tiny kitchen, his expensive suit contrasting sharply with the peeling wallpaper and dated appliances. "I trusted you," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper before rising sharply. "I trusted you, and now look what's happened. My life is ruined. Everyone knows everything about me, every failure, every mistake." She slammed the mug down, coffee sloshing onto the already stained tablecloth. Henry sat quietly, his hands folded around his own cup. The usually commanding presence of the governor seemed diminished in the afternoon light, filtering through Clara's dusty windows. "You had no right," she continued, tears threatening to spill. "No right to drag me into this spotlight. I was managing just fine before you came along with your tests and your initiatives. Now everyone knows what a mess I am. My daughter can't even go to school without hearing whispers about her mother, the fraud." "Clara," Henry started, but she cut him off. "Do you know what it's like? To have every mistake you've ever made splashed across the newspapers? To have people looking at you like you're nothing?" Her voice cracked. "Of course you don't. You're the governor. You're perfect." Henry's face changed then, a shadow passing over his features. He reached down and pulled up his pant leg slightly, revealing a prosthetic limb. Clara's anger faltered for a moment as she stared at it. "Perfect?" He gave a bitter laugh. "I wake up screaming most nights. The doctors call it PTSD, but that's just letters. It doesn't capture what it feels like to see your friends die in front of you, to make decisions that cost lives." Clara sat back, her anger momentarily forgotten, as Henry continued speaking, his voice heavy with emotion. "I lost my leg in an ambush outside Kandahar. But that's not what haunts me. It's the faces of the men I commanded, good men, brave men, who didn't come home. Every medal they gave me feels like a weight around my neck because I survived, and they didn't." He took a shaky breath, and Clara noticed his hands weren't quite steady either. "You think being governor makes me perfect? It makes me lonely. Every handshake is calculated. Every smile is measured. People don't see me. They see the office, the title. Do you know how long it's been since someone treated me like a regular person?" Clara remembered the day at the crosswalk, how she'd helped him across without knowing who he was. Understanding began to dawn in her eyes. "That day you helped me," Henry said softly. "You didn't see the governor. You just saw someone who needed help. Do you know how rare that is? How precious?" He leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "You want to know why I chose you for this initiative? Because you have something I lost, somewhere between the war and the governor's mansion. Raw, genuine compassion. The kind that doesn't care about appearances or consequences." Clara watched as Henry's composed facade crumbled slightly, revealing the pain beneath. "I envy that about you, Clara. You think your past makes you weak? Your struggles make you real. When you speak about helping people, it comes from experience, not theory. When you talk about hope, people believe you because you've lived without it." The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle hum of the old refrigerator. Clara's anger had dissolved, replaced by a strange mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. For the first time, she saw beyond the polished exterior of Governor Caldwell. She saw the limping veteran who still carried the weight of war. She saw the lonely man behind the title, who tested people's compassion because he needed to believe it still existed. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "No one does," Henry replied, his voice rough. "Just like no one knew your struggles until now. The difference is, you faced yours with dignity. Me? I hide behind this suit and this title, pretending I've got it all figured out." Clara reached across the table, hesitating for a moment, before placing her hand over his. The gesture surprised them both, the poor, single mother comforting the governor. But in that moment, titles didn't matter. They were just two broken people, sharing their pain in a small kitchen on a quiet afternoon. "Sometimes," Henry said, staring at their hands, "I think the real reason I started this initiative wasn't just to help communities. I think I was hoping to find someone, to remind me what real humanity looks like. Not the political kind, not the kind that makes good headlines, the kind that helps a stranger cross the street in the rain. Clara saw tears in his eyes that he quickly blinked away. The mighty governor, vulnerable and human in her kitchen, the realization hit her. Her struggles were out in the open, yes, but maybe that wasn't the end of the world. Maybe there was strength in being real, in being exactly who you are, scars and all. The afternoon light shifted, casting different shadows across her small kitchen. Clara looked at Henry, really looked at him, and saw not the governor who had complicated her life, but a man carrying his own heavy burdens. A man who, despite his power and position, envied her ability to stay genuine in a world that often punished authenticity. They sat in companionable silence, two wounded souls finding unexpected understanding across a scratched kitchen table. The coffee grew cold between them, forgotten, in the wake of deeper truths shared. Morning sunlight filtered through Clara's threadbare curtains, casting warm patches across her small bedroom. She lay in bed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, Henry's words from the previous night still echoing in her mind. The revelation of his struggles, the nightmares that haunted him, the weight of leadership he carried, had shifted something inside her. Clara rolled over, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. Messages from concerned friends and coworkers filled her screen, but one stood out. A simple text from Henry. "The world needs your voice. Your struggles aren't your shame. They're your strength." The smell of slightly burned toast wafted from the kitchen. Clara smiled, knowing Lily was trying to make breakfast again. She pushed herself up, running her fingers through her tangled hair, and took a deep breath. The familiar knot of anxiety still sat in her stomach, but today it felt different, more like butterflies than lead. In the kitchen, Lily stood on her tiptoes, carefully spreading jam on two slightly charred pieces of toast. Her tongue stuck out in concentration, determined to make everything perfect. "Morning, sweetie," Clara said, wrapping her arms around her daughter from behind. Lily spun around, her eyes bright with hope. "Mom, I made breakfast. Are you feeling better?" Clara squeezed her daughter tighter, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. "You know what? I am. Actually," she pulled back, looking into Lily's eager face. "I think I need to make a phone call." Lily's eyes widened. "To Governor Henry?" Clara nodded, her heart racing but her mind clear. She picked up her phone, scrolling to Henry's number. Her thumb hovered over it for a moment before she pressed call. The line rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Clara? I'm glad you called." "Henry," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "About the rally next week, I want to speak." There was a pause, and she could hear the smile in his voice when he responded. "I knew you would." "I'm scared," she admitted, watching as Lily pretended not to listen while arranging their toast on mismatched plates. "But maybe that's okay." "Fear means you're being brave," Henry said. "And Clara, this time tell them everything. Your story, all of it. That's what people need to hear." After hanging up, Clara turned to find Lily bouncing on her toes, practically vibrating with excitement. Her daughter launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Clara's waist. "That's my brave mom," Lily exclaimed, her voice muffled against Clara's shirt. "I knew you wouldn't give up." Clara stroked her daughter's hair, tears pricking at her corners of her eyes. "How did I get such a wise little girl?" They sat together at their small table, eating slightly burned toast and talking about what Clara might say at the rally. Lily suggested she should tell everyone about their Friday night dance parties in the living room, making Clara laugh for the first time in days. Throughout the day, Clara jotted down notes on scraps of paper. At her diner shift between orders, during her lunch break at the cleaning job, on the bus ride home, words and phrases tumbled out, raw and honest. Not just about helping others, but about needing help herself. About crying in the shower so Lily wouldn't hear. About choosing between electricity and groceries. About the shame of food stamps, and the pride of maintaining hope despite it all. That evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Clara sat at their kitchen table with all her scattered notes spread out before her. The clock ticked past midnight as she organized her thoughts, crossing out and rewriting, determined to find the right words. Her hands trembled as she practiced speaking out loud, her voice barely above a whisper in the quiet apartment. Yes, I have debts. Yes, I've been evicted. Yes, I've failed. But compassion isn't born from perfection, it's born from understanding pain and choosing to help anyway. She paused, gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. The words felt true, but vulnerable. Scary. Right, Clara continued practicing, her voice growing slightly stronger with each repetition. She spoke about the veteran at the crosswalk, now known to be Henry, and how that moment taught her that courage often comes in small choices. She talked about her daughter's unwavering faith, about the strength she found in their little family of two. The apartment was silent except for her voice and the distant hum of traffic. Her hands still shook as she held her notes, but her spirit felt steady, anchored by a new understanding. Her struggles weren't just something to overcome, they were the very thing that allowed her to connect with others, to understand, to help. She spoke the final lines of her speech into the darkness. I stand before you not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who gets up every morning and tries again. And maybe that's what real courage looks like. Not fearlessness, but faith that tomorrow might be better if we're brave enough to help each other through today. The clock struck 1 in the morning. Clara gathered her notes, paper-clipped them together, and set them on the counter for tomorrow. Her hands might have been trembling, but her heart was sure. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same strength that had carried her through all the hard days before. Not alone this time, but surrounded by the unexpected family she'd found in this journey. She paused at Lily's doorway on her way to bed, watching her daughter's peaceful sleeping form. In the soft glow of the nightlight, Clara whispered a quiet thank you, for her daughter's wisdom, for Henry's understanding, and for the strange twist of fate that had brought them all together at that rainy crosswalk. The night was quiet now, but Clara's mind was full of tomorrow's possibilities. Her hands might still shake when she stood at that podium, but her spirit would stand steady, ready to share her truth with whoever needed to hear it. The convention center buzzed with tension as hundreds of people filled the seats. News cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. The air felt thick with anticipation and judgment. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Clara Thompson stood backstage, her hands trembling as she smoothed her borrowed navy blazer. "Mom, you look beautiful," Lily whispered, reaching up to straighten Clara's collar. The simple gesture nearly brought tears to Clara's eyes. Henry appeared beside them, his face etched with concern. "Clara, are you sure about this? We can postpone if you're not ready." Clara took a deep breath, remembering their conversation from the night before. If a decorated governor could share his vulnerabilities with her, she could face these people with her truth. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. From the stage, she could hear the moderator introducing her. The words, "controversial figure," and "recent revelations" cut through the general murmur. Clara's chest tightened. "Just be yourself," Henry said softly, squeezing her shoulder. "That's all anyone needs to see." Clara nodded, hugged Lily one last time, and walked toward the steps leading to the stage. Each step felt heavy, like walking through deep water. The bright lights hit her face as she emerged, temporarily blinding her. When her vision cleared, she saw hundreds of faces staring back at her, some curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. The microphone stood at center stage like a challenge. Clara approached it slowly, her sensible shoes clicking against the wooden floor. The sound echoed through the sudden silence. She gripped the podium, her knuckles white, and looked out at the sea of faces. In the front row, she spotted the reporter who'd written the exposé about her past. He sat with his notebook ready, pen poised. A few rows behind him, she recognized some of the donors who'd pulled their support. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but their judgment felt like a physical weight. Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. She heard a few derisive chuckles from the back of the room. Then, from the side of the stage, she heard Lily's small voice, "I love you, Mom." Those 4 simple words broke through her fear. Clara looked down at her prepared speech, then deliberately set it aside. Her hands stopped shaking. "You all know who I am now," she began, her voice clear despite her racing heart. The newspapers made sure of that. I'm a single mother who can barely make rent. I've been evicted. I've had my electricity cut off. I've served cold cereal for dinner because the paycheck hadn't come yet." The room was completely still. Clara squared her shoulders and continued. "You've seen my failed marriage, my mounting bills, my desperate attempts to keep my head above water. You've judged me for these things. Questioned whether someone like me belongs in this initiative." She paused, looking directly at the reporter who'd exposed her. "And you know what? You're right about all of it. Yes, I am poor. Yes, I've stumbled. But compassion doesn't come from perfection, it comes from love." A murmur ran through the crowd. Clara's voice grew stronger. "I help others not because I have extra to give, but because I know what it's like to have nothing. I understand the shame of choosing between medicine and groceries. I know the terror of hearing your child cough at night and not being able to afford a doctor." In the front row, several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Clara saw tears in one woman's eyes. "When I helped Governor Caldwell across that street, I didn't see a politician. I saw another human being struggling in the rain. That's what this initiative is about. Seeing each other's humanity, regardless of our bank accounts or social status." The audience was leaning forward now, hanging on her words. Even the skeptical donors looked thoughtful. "You want to know if I'm qualified to speak about compassion? My qualifications come from lying awake at night, worried about my daughter's future. They come from working 2 jobs and still falling short. They come from knowing exactly what it feels like to need help and be too ashamed to ask for it." Clara's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "But here's what else you should know. I've never felt richer than when sharing my last dollar with someone who needed it more. I've never felt stronger than when helping others, even on my weakest days. And I've never felt more worthy than when I chose kindness over judgment." The first clap started somewhere in the middle of the room. Then another joined it, and another. Soon, the applause was thunderous. People began standing, their faces shining with emotion and understanding. From the wings, Clara could see Henry watching her, tears streaming down his face. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear over the roar of the crowd. "She's the leader we needed." Clara stood in amazement as volunteers streamed through the community center doors. Young professionals in business attire worked alongside retired teachers and struggling single parents. The initiative that had nearly crumbled was now stronger than ever, drawing people from every corner of society. "Mrs. Thompson," called out Sarah, a banker who'd once given Clara dismissive looks. "Where do you need these blankets?" She carried a box overflowing with warm quilts, her designer shoes clicking against the floor. "Over by the clothing section, please," Clara directed with a warm smile. "And Sarah? Call me Clara." The transformation over the past few weeks had been remarkable. After her speech at the rally, something had shifted in the community. People who'd once whispered behind her back now sought her guidance. Her past struggles weren't a source of shame anymore. They were proof of her understanding. Henry had kept his word. The initiative expanded beyond their original goals, establishing food banks, job training programs, and emergency housing assistance. Clara's small apartment was now filled with thank you cards from families they'd helped, each one a reminder that vulnerability could be a strength. "Mom!" Lily's voice rang out across the room. She was helping an elderly woman sort through donated books, her face glowing with purpose. "Mrs. Martinez found some math workbooks for me." Clara's heart swelled. Lily had bloomed in this new environment, surrounded by people who showed her that kindness knew no social boundaries. The little girl who'd once hidden her worn shoes now walked with confidence, proud to be part of something bigger than herself. At her new desk, a real office with her name on the door, Clara reviewed the latest program numbers. As the initiative's community liaison, she earned a steady salary that covered their needs with room to spare. The position had come with benefits too: health insurance, paid vacation, and a retirement plan. Words that had once seemed like impossible luxuries. "These reports are impressive," Henry said, appearing in her doorway. He'd traded his suit for jeans and a casual shirt, looking more comfortable in this setting than he ever had in the governor's mansion. "You've got a gift for connecting people, Clara." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Who would have thought that being poor could be a qualification?" Her tone was light, but they both knew the truth behind the joke. "It's not about being poor or rich," Henry replied, settling into the chair. "It's about understanding human dignity. You never lost sight of that, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise." Through the window, Clara watched as a wealthy real estate developer helped a homeless veteran fill out housing forms. Nearby, a former critic who'd called her a fraud was now teaching computer skills to single mothers. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable were dissolving, one connection at a time. The initiative had arranged for financial counselors to help Clara navigate her debts. Through a combination of program support and anonymous donations, the burdens that had weighed her down for years were lifted. No more choosing between medicine and groceries. No more dreading the mail or screening calls from collectors. As evening approached, Clara gathered her things, still amazed that she could leave work at a reasonable hour. No more double shifts or cleaning offices late into the night. She and Lily could have dinner together, help with homework, even read stories before bed. They walked home through streets that felt different now. Neighbors waved from their porches. The diner where she'd once hidden her tears now offered free meals to families in need. Even her old landlord had joined the initiative, working to provide affordable housing solutions. "Mom," Lily said as they climbed the stairs to their apartment, "Jenny from school asked if I could come to her birthday party. Can I go?" "Of course, sweetie." Clara unlocked their door, remembering how she used to dread such invitations, knowing she couldn't afford a gift. Now, she could give Lily these simple joys without panic. Their apartment welcomed them with warm familiarity. Though still modest, it no longer felt like a place of last resort. New curtains brightened the windows, and a small bookshelf held Lily's growing collection. Clara had even bought a few plants, their green leaves reaching toward the light. After a peaceful dinner, real food, not just whatever was on sale, Clara helped Lily with her homework. They sat at their small table, working through math problems together, no longer rushing through the evening in exhaustion. Later, as Clara tucked Lily into bed, she paused to look around the room. Gone were the cardboard boxes that had served as dresser drawers. Gone was the constant fear of eviction notices. In their place was stability, dignity, and hope. Lily snuggled under her new quilt, a gift from one of the initiative's volunteers. "Mom?" she asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we really okay now?" Clara sat on the edge of the bed, stroking her daughter's hair. The question carried the weight of years spent watching her mother struggle, of nights when dinner was just crackers, of birthdays without presents. But now, Clara could answer with certainty. "We're safe now, sweetheart," she whispered, and for the first time in years, she knew it was absolutely true. The autumn sun painted golden streaks across the new community center's pristine white walls. Clara Thompson stood at the podium, her hands steady on its wooden edges, a far cry from the trembling woman she'd been just months ago. The building behind her represented more than brick and mortar. It was a symbol of hope rising from despair. Beside her, Governor Henry Caldwell sat in his wheelchair, distinguished in his Navy suit, his military medals catching the morning light. His presence brought a familiar comfort now, so different from the intimidation she'd felt at that first dinner. Lily, wearing her favorite yellow dress, bounced excitedly in her front row seat, giving her mother a thumbs up. Cameras clicked and flashed, but Clara didn't flinch. The reporters who had once sought to tear her down now waited eagerly for her words. She took a deep breath, remembering how far she'd come from those dark days of shame and hiding. "When I first helped a stranger across the street," Clara began, her voice clear and strong, "I never imagined it would lead to this moment. That stranger turned out to be our beloved governor." She glanced at Henry with a warm smile. But more importantly, he turned out to be a true friend. The crowd chuckled, and Henry's eyes crinkled with emotion. "Many of you know my story now," Clara continued. "The struggles, the failures, the moments I wanted to give up. There was a time when those tabloid headlines about my past felt like a death sentence." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "But something beautiful happened. This community chose to see beyond my mistakes. You saw what my daughter Lily always saw, that our broken pieces can become building blocks for something greater." Lily beamed from her seat, pride shining in her young face. "This center," Clara gestured to the building behind her, was built by all of us. The wealthy and the struggling, the powerful and the ordinary, working side by side. Every day, I watched barriers break down. I saw CEOs learning from single moms about real courage. I watched children like my Lily teach adults about unconditional acceptance. Clara's voice softened as she looked at her daughter. "Lily, sweetheart, you never stopped believing in me. Even when I couldn't believe in myself, your faith kept me going. You taught me that love doesn't care about bank accounts or past mistakes." Tears glistened in many eyes throughout the audience. Henry reached over and squeezed Clara's hand briefly, a gesture that would have once terrified her but now felt natural. "Governor Caldwell." Clara turned to him. "You saw something in me that day at the crosswalk. Not just a poor single mom, but a person capable of making a difference. You showed me that true leadership isn't about titles or power, but about vulnerability and compassion. Your willingness to share your own struggles with PTSD helped me find the courage to face my shame." Henry nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped down his cheek. "To everyone here today," Clara's voice grew stronger, "this center belongs to all of us. It will be a place where nobody has to face their battles alone. Where a helping hand isn't charity, it's community. Where we remember that every person, no matter their circumstances, has value and deserves dignity." The audience broke into applause, but Clara raised her hand gently. "I'm not finished," she smiled, "because the most important thing I've learned is this. Kindness isn't just about grand gestures or buildings. It's about the small moments, helping someone across a street, sharing a meal, listening without judgment. Those moments ripple outward in ways we can't imagine." As Clara stepped back from the podium, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. She walked to the center's entrance where a large red ribbon stretched across the doorway. Lily ran up to join her, taking her hand with excited squeezes. Henry wheeled himself over, handling the ceremonial scissors. The cheering grew louder as Clara and Lily each placed a hand on the scissors alongside Henry's. Together, they cut the ribbon as cameras flashed and applause thundered around them. In that perfect moment, Clara looked down at her daughter's shining face. "See, Lily," she whispered, her heart full, "kindness really can change the world." Lily squeezed her mother's hand as the ribbon fluttered to the ground. Henry watched them with fatherly pride, his official governor's facade melting into genuine joy. The crowd continued to cheer, but for Clara, the world narrowed to this single moment, standing tall with her daughter beside her, surrounded by a community that had become family, knowing that sometimes the greatest triumphs grow from our deepest wounds. The autumn breeze caught the cut ribbon, lifting it briefly into the air, a final symbol of barriers broken and new beginnings born from the simple choice to show compassion, even on a rainy afternoon at a busy crosswalk. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Clara Thompson, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.